Starting next month, you'll owe us $800 in rent. For a moment, I honestly thought my daughter-in-law was joking. I looked up from my coffee and waited for the smile. It never came. Emily stood at the kitchen island in a cream-colored sweater, holding a neatly printed rental agreement in one hand and a pen in the other. Behind her, the morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the beautiful Scottsdale home, turning the polished hardwood floors golden. My son Ryan sat 3 feet away. He stared into his cereal bowl. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't say a single word. Emily slid the papers across the granite countertop. "I've already calculated everything," she said matter-of-factly. "800 covers your room, utilities, internet, and shared household expenses." I blinked. "My room?" "Well," she said with a small shrug, "you're living here. We all have responsibilities." I slowly picked up the papers. She had actually drafted a month-to-month rental agreement. There was a place for my signature, a due date, a late fee, even a clause stating I could be asked to leave with 30 days' notice if I failed to pay. I looked at Ryan. He finally raised his eyes. "Dad," his voice barely escaped, "I think it's fair." Fair. The word echoed in my head. Emily folded her arms. "If we're being honest," she continued, "most people your age pay something when they live with family." I glanced around the kitchen. The Viking appliances, the marble countertops, the custom cabinets, the sweeping view of Camelback Mountain in the distance. Everything about this place screamed success. Neither of them knew. 9 months earlier, I had quietly bought this entire $2.6 million house. Legally, they weren't charging me rent. They were trying to charge their landlord. My name is Thomas Bennett. I'm 67 years old, a widower and a retired commercial contractor. For 42 years, I built office buildings, schools, medical clinics, and apartment complexes all across Arizona. Concrete, steel, deadlines. That's what I understood. People, I thought I understood those too. Apparently, I was wrong. My wife, Linda, used to say something that annoyed me when we were younger. "Tom," she'd laugh, "houses are easy. Families are the hard part." I always rolled my eyes. Turns out, she'd been right. Linda passed away 3 years earlier after a short battle with pancreatic cancer. The doctors warned us. The hospice nurses prepared us. Nothing prepares a husband for the silence that follows 50 years of marriage. Every room in our old house whispered her name. Her gardening gloves still hung beside the garage door. Her favorite coffee mug remained in the cabinet. Even the indentation on her side of the mattress refused to disappear. After a year of living alone, I finally sold the house. Not because I wanted to, because every day inside those walls hurt a little more than the day before. Ryan insisted moving closer to his family would help. "You'll be around the grandkids," he told me. "You won't be lonely anymore." Emily agreed enthusiastically. "We'd love having you nearby." Those words sounded sincere back then. They even helped me find a small apartment only 10 minutes away. For the first year, life was peaceful. I'd stop by after school to pick up my grandkids, Mason and Chloe. I'd take them for ice cream, help with homework, teach Mason how to build birdhouses in my garage. Emily thanked me often. Ryan hugged me every Sunday. If someone had told me then that one day they'd hand me a rental agreement, I would have laughed. Things began changing slowly, almost too slowly to notice. Emily became obsessed with appearances. New luxury SUV, designer handbags, a backyard renovation, a kitchen remodel that looked perfectly fine before she tore everything out. Then came expensive vacations, private schools, country club memberships. Ryan always looked exhausted. He started working weekends, then evenings. Eventually, I stopped asking questions. I figured every marriage has its seasons. Until one afternoon, pure accident changed everything. I was having lunch with my old attorney, Frank Collins. Frank and I had known each other for over 30 years. He handled the paperwork whenever I bought commercial property during my construction days. Halfway through lunch, he frowned at his tablet. "That's strange." "What is?" He looked at me. "Your son's address." "What about it?" "The lender handling that mortgage just filed preliminary foreclosure paperwork." I nearly dropped my fork. "What?" Frank turned the screen toward me. There it was. The address, Ryan's house, this house. The mortgage was seriously delinquent, months behind. I couldn't believe it. Ryan had never mentioned financial trouble, not once. That night I drove home wondering what had happened. The next morning I asked Ryan if everything was okay. He smiled. "Everything's great, Dad." He lied without hesitation. A week later I quietly met with Frank again. He explained the options. The bank hadn't completed foreclosure yet. The owners still had time. But unless someone paid the outstanding balance or purchased the property, they'd lose everything, especially the kids. That thought stayed with me. Not Ryan, not Emily, the kids. Mason had learned to ride his bike in that driveway. Chloe measured her height against the pantry door every birthday. They didn't deserve to watch strangers move into their home, so I made a decision, one I never told anyone. Through an LLC Frank helped establish years ago for investment properties, I negotiated directly with the lender. The transaction remained confidential. The mortgage disappeared. Ownership transferred. The family continued making what they believed were mortgage payments. Those payments actually became rent under the existing occupancy arrangement handled through escrow until new agreements could be made. Frank suggested telling them immediately. I refused. They're already embarrassed enough, I said. They don't need to know I bailed them out. I truly believed I'd tell them someday. Just not yet. Then life moved on, or so I thought. Over the following months, Emily changed. She started referring to rooms as my house. She criticized where I parked, complained if I left tools in the garage after fixing something. Once she actually told me not to rearrange furniture because it hurt the home's resale value. I remember thinking that was an odd thing to say. Now I understood. She believed she owned every inch of this place. Last month, she even joked to a neighbor. We'll probably sell this place in a few years and upgrade. Upgrade. The irony almost made me smile. This morning, the joke ended. Emily tapped the rental agreement with one manicured fingernail. So, I looked at Ryan again. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. Finally, I set the papers on the counter. I'll think about it. Emily smiled. I knew you'd understand. No. She misunderstood completely. She thought silence meant surrender. She had no idea. My silence was simply giving me time to decide how much kindness they still deserved. I didn't sleep much that night. The unsigned rental agreement sat on my kitchen table, illuminated by the small lamp Linda had insisted we buy nearly 20 years ago. You always need one warm light in the house, she'd said. It reminds people they're welcome. I stared at the papers for almost an hour. $800 wasn't the issue. If Ryan had walked into my apartment and said, Dad, we're struggling. Can you help us with the bills? I probably would have handed him 10 times that amount without asking another question. Money had never been the problem. Respect was. There's a world of difference between asking for help and demanding payment from the man who spent his entire life helping you. The following morning, I followed my usual routine. Coffee, a short walk, breakfast at the neighborhood diner where half the customers were retirees who'd been coming there longer than I had. Martha, the waitress, poured my coffee before I even sat down. You look tired, Tom. Didn't sleep much. She smiled kindly. Happens to all of us. I smiled back. If only insomnia had been my biggest problem. As I stirred my coffee, memories began finding me one after another. Funny how betrayal has a way of reopening every old chapter of your life. Ryan was 6 years old the first time I worked an entire weekend without coming home. A hospital project outside Phoenix had fallen behind schedule. The company offered double overtime. Linda didn't want me to go. Ryan had baseball that Saturday, his first game. I'll make the next one. I promised. Instead, I spent 36 straight hours pouring concrete beneath the Arizona sun. Monday morning, I walked through the front door exhausted. Ryan ran toward me holding a tiny plastic trophy. We won, Dad. I hugged him so tightly he laughed. You missed my home run. That sentence stayed with me for years. Not because he blamed me, because he didn't. He simply wanted to share it with me. I promised myself I'd miss fewer moments after that, and I kept that promise. I coached Little League, helped with science projects, sat through middle school band concerts that sounded like 30 cats fighting inside a metal trash can. Every milestone mattered, every report card, every broken heart, every scraped knee. I tried to be there. Not perfectly, but consistently. College wasn't cheap. Ryan wanted to attend Arizona State University. Linda and I had saved for years. Still, tuition climbed faster than we expected, so I postponed retirement. 3 more years. 3 more summers climbing scaffolding in 110-degree heat. 3 more winters driving before sunrise. When Ryan graduated debt-free, he hugged me outside Sun Devil Stadium. I'll never forget everything you and Mom sacrificed. I believed him. Then came his wedding. Emily was beautiful, confident, ambitious. Linda adored her immediately. So full of energy, she'd whispered. Looking back, maybe we both confused confidence with character. The wedding itself cost far more than Ryan could afford. I quietly wrote another check. Not because anyone demanded it, because I wanted my son to begin married life without crushing debt. Emily hugged me afterward. You've done so much for us. I remember thinking how lucky Ryan was. Funny how life changes. When Linda became sick, Emily visited almost every weekend. She brought homemade soup, flowers, sat beside Linda's bed reading magazines out loud. Those memories made everything happening now even harder to understand. People don't usually change overnight. Sometimes success changes them. Sometimes money. Sometimes fear. Sometimes they simply stop pretending. After Linda's funeral, Ryan came to see me every Sunday. At first, then every other Sunday, then once a month. Eventually, our conversations became text messages. Emily was always busy. The kids had soccer, dance lessons, birthday parties, life. I understood, or at least I thought I did. So I adjusted. Instead of waiting for invitations, I'd stop by after school. The grandchildren loved that. We'd build bird feeders, fix bicycles, bake cookies. Mason insisted my chocolate chip cookies were better than his mother's. I wisely kept that information to myself. Little by little, though, Emily's tone changed. One afternoon, she watched me replacing a broken sprinkler valve in the backyard. You don't have to fix everything. I know. I just don't want people thinking we can't afford repairs. I wiped dirt from my hands. I wasn't thinking about the neighbors. I know. But her expression suggested something different. A month later, I replaced the garbage disposal. Another week, I fixed the garage door, then the dishwasher. Each time she thanked me a little less. Until eventually, she stopped thanking me altogether. One Friday afternoon, I arrived to pick up Mason and Chloe from school. Emily met me at the front door. We've decided we'd rather hire someone. For what? Watching the kids? I looked confused. I've always enjoyed spending time with them. I know, she smiled politely. But we don't want to become dependent. Dependent. That word stung. Not because she no longer needed babysitting, because somehow the grandfather who loved his grandchildren had become a convenience. I nodded. No problem. That evening, Mason called me. Grandpa, Mom says you're busy now. I swallowed hard. No, buddy. Then why didn't you come? I couldn't answer. Ryan noticed the distance. I know he did. Once while we were grilling burgers, I finally asked him, everything okay between your wife and me? He stared at the grill. Emily just likes having things organized. Does she? He sighed. She's under stress. Aren't we all? He didn't respond. Instead, he flipped another hamburger. Conversation over. That became Ryan's specialty, ending conversations before difficult truths appeared. The biggest surprise wasn't Emily's behavior. It was watching my own son slowly disappear. The boy who once defended classmates from bullies now couldn't disagree with his own wife over dinner. Whenever Emily made a sharp comment, Ryan smiled nervously, changed the subject, looked at his phone. Anything except speak. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd raised him to avoid conflict. Maybe I'd solved too many of his problems growing up. Maybe protecting him had unintentionally taught him that someone else would always carry the weight. Those thoughts haunted me. 3 days after the rental agreement, Emily invited me over for dinner. Her text read, family meeting. 6:30, family meeting, interesting choice of words. Dinner was grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, rice pilaf. The grandchildren chatted happily about summer camp, while the adults pretended everything was normal. Halfway through dessert, Emily cleared her throat. So, she looked directly at me. Have you made a decision? Ryan's shoulders tensed. I reached into my jacket. Instead of removing a checkbook, I pulled out the rental agreement, still unsigned. I've read it several times, Emily smiled. And I have one question. Sure. If I refuse, her smile faded slightly. She answered without hesitation. Then we'll probably need you to find somewhere else to live. The room became very quiet. Even the grandchildren sensed something was wrong. I slowly turned toward my son. He looked down at his plate. Again, no words, no defense, no apology, just silence. I folded the agreement neatly and slipped it back into my pocket. I'll think about it a little longer. Emily leaned back confidently. That's probably best. She believed she had all the leverage. She believed I had nowhere else to go. She believed the house belonged to her family. As I drove home beneath the Arizona sunset, I reached for my phone. There was only one person I needed to call. Frank answered on the second ring. Everything all right, Tom? I looked once in the rearview mirror. No, I spoke calmly, but I think it's time we stop waiting. There was a brief silence. Then Frank asked the question he'd been expecting for months. You want me to prepare the paperwork? I kept driving. Yes. This week. Frank Collins had been my attorney for 34 years. He'd seen me negotiate million-dollar construction contracts without raising my voice. He'd watched me settle disputes that should have ended in lawsuits with nothing more than a handshake. He also knew something most people didn't. When I stopped speaking, I had already made my decision. That Friday morning, I walked into his Scottsdale office carrying nothing but a worn leather folder and a photograph of Linda tucked inside my wallet. Frank looked up from his desk. "You look better." "I slept." "Made peace with your decision." I nodded once. "I have." He motioned toward the chair across from him. "Let's do this the right way." The conference room overlooked Camelback Mountain. Years ago, I would have admired the view. Today, I barely noticed it. Frank opened a thick file. The property transfer was recorded 9 months ago. He slid copies toward me. The LLC legally purchased the home from the lender after the default. I quietly flipped through the documents. Every signature, every notarized page, every recording number from Maricopa County. Perfectly legal, perfectly clean. The mortgage is paid in full. The title, held solely by Bennett Property Holdings. I smiled faintly. My least creative company name. Frank chuckled. "You never cared about clever names." "I cared about solid foundations." He leaned back. "So? You want to transfer ownership into your personal name?" I nodded. "Yes. You understand they'll be able to see it immediately once they're served." "I know. And once we begin eviction proceedings, there won't be any going back." He waited. I signed the transfer documents without hesitation. "There," I said. "No more hiding behind an LLC." Frank gathered the paperwork. "I'll have everything recorded Monday morning." Before I left, he asked something unexpected. "Tom, what? Are you doing this because you're angry?" I thought about that question for a long moment. "No." "Then why?" I looked out the window. "Because they already decided I don't belong. If I keep pretending nothing happened, I'm agreeing with them." Frank slowly nodded. "I was hoping you'd say that." Driving home, I found myself thinking about Linda again. Not the last months, the happy years. She had always been the emotional one. I was the practical one. Whenever Ryan got into trouble as a teenager, I'd immediately start looking for solutions. Linda would ask questions first. Why did he make that choice? What was he feeling? I used to tease her. "You'd make a terrible contractor." She'd laugh. "And you'd make a terrible therapist." We balanced each other. Now I had to figure out both jobs alone. Saturday morning, Mason called. "Grandpa, hey buddy, can you still come to my baseball game?" I smiled despite everything. I wouldn't miss it. The field sat only 15 minutes away. Ryan coached first base. Emily sat with the other parents beneath a shade canopy. When I arrived, Mason spotted me immediately. "Grandpa!" He ran across the grass before anyone could stop him. He wrapped both arms around my waist. "You came." "Of course I did." "You always do." His words hit harder than he realized. Yes, I always had, and I always would. For him, for Chloe. Children should never pay for adult mistakes. After the game, Mason proudly carried his helmet toward the parking lot. Emily intercepted us. "We're going straight home." Mason looked disappointed. "But Grandpa always gets ice cream with us." Emily smiled politely. "Not today." I looked at Mason. "It's okay, buddy. We'll go another time." He nodded sadly. As they walked away, Chloe looked back through the rear window of the SUV. She pressed her tiny hand against the glass. I raised mine. The SUV disappeared around the corner. That image stayed with me all afternoon. Monday morning, Frank called. "It's done. The deed has been recorded." "Good. I've also prepared the eviction notices." I took a deep breath. "Let's review them." He emailed everything while we spoke. Arizona law required proper notice. Specific timelines, formal service, no shortcuts. I insisted everything be done exactly by the book. No surprises, no legal tricks, no humiliation, just facts. Later that afternoon, another thought occurred to me. I called Frank again. "One more thing." "What's that?" "I don't want the kids caught in the middle." "What do you have in mind?" "I want you to find a furnished rental nearby." "For Ryan?" "No. For the grandchildren." He laughed softly. "You know that's impossible." "I know." I smiled. "So find one big enough for all 4 of them." He understood immediately. "You'll pay the first few months." "As many as necessary." He was quiet for a moment. "Tom, they don't deserve this." "I know. No matter how badly their parents behaved." "I know." Tuesday evening, I drove past the house, not because I wanted to spy, because I wanted one last memory before everything changed. The lights glowed warmly. Someone had hung flower baskets on the front porch. Ryan was washing his truck. Emily laughed with a neighbor across the driveway. From the outside, they looked like the perfect American family. No one walking past would ever imagine the marriage under pressure, the unpaid mortgage that had nearly destroyed them, or the father sitting quietly inside his pickup, trying to save what little remained of his family. The next afternoon, Emily called. "Hi, Tom." Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Hello? We're repainting the upstairs guest room." "Oh, we've decided to turn it into a home office." I smiled slightly. "Have you?" "Yeah. We don't really need a guest room anymore." The words were subtle, but I understood them perfectly. There wasn't going to be space for me, not emotionally, not physically. I simply answered, "I hope it turns out nicely." She seemed almost disappointed that I didn't argue. That evening, I opened the old cedar chest Linda had kept at the foot of our bed. Inside were birthday cards, vacation photos, our wedding album. Near the bottom lay a small white envelope with my name written across it in her handwriting. I'd forgotten it was there. Inside was a note she'd written years earlier during one of our anniversary trips. It read, "Tom, you've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Promise me something. If the day ever comes when someone mistakes your kindness for weakness, don't let them. Loving people doesn't mean letting them erase your dignity." I read it 3 times, then a 4th. My eyes blurred. I could almost hear her voice. She wasn't telling me to seek revenge. She was reminding me that kindness without self-respect eventually becomes permission. I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. Thursday morning, Frank arrived at my apartment carrying a slim leather briefcase. He laid 3 sealed envelopes on my dining table. One for Ryan, one for Emily, and one for the official process server. I stared at them. Such ordinary-looking envelopes. Amazing how a family's future could fit inside a few sheets of paper. Frank closed his briefcase. "Once these are delivered," "I know." He studied my face. "Last chance to stop." I looked toward the window where the Arizona sun was beginning to rise. "No." I rested one hand on the envelopes. "I've spent my whole life building homes." Then I quietly added, "It's time to remind my own family what a home actually means." Tomorrow morning, they would find out exactly who owned theirs. The process server delivered the envelopes at exactly 9:14 Friday morning. I wasn't there. I didn't want to witness the moment. Some things are better left unseen. Instead, I sat on a bench outside Chaparral Park with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands. At 9:26, my phone rang. Ryan. I let it ring twice before answering. "Dad!" His breathing was heavy. "What? What is this?" "I assume you opened the envelope?" "Eviction papers." His voice cracked. "There has to be some mistake." "There isn't." He lowered his voice. "Can you come over? I'll be there in 30 minutes. The driveway was already crowded when I arrived. Ryan stood outside pacing. Emily was talking loudly into her phone. The process server had long since left. Even from across the yard, I could hear her. "This is harassment. There's no way. We own this house." She stopped when she saw my truck. Her face turned bright red. She marched toward me, waving the papers. "What kind of sick joke is this?" "It isn't a joke." She thrust the documents into my chest. "You think you can scare us?" "No, I'm simply informing you. Informing us of what? That the house belongs to me." For a second, she actually laughed, a loud, sarcastic laugh. Ryan didn't. He looked terrified. Emily shook her head. "This is ridiculous. Our names are on the mortgage." "Were," I answered calmly. "What me were?" She frowned. "I don't know what game you're playing." "I'm not playing one." Ryan finally spoke. "Dad." His voice barely carried. "Please come inside." The kitchen looked exactly the way it had the morning she handed me the rental agreement. Same granite island, same polished floors, same expensive coffee machine humming quietly in the corner. Funny how quickly a room can feel completely different. Emily remained standing. Ryan pulled out a chair for me. I sat. Neither of them did. Finally, Emily slapped the eviction notice onto the countertop. "Explain this." I folded my hands. 9 months ago, your mortgage fell into default." She immediately interrupted. "That's impossible." "It isn't." Ryan looked at her. "You told me we'd caught up." Emily ignored him. She stared at me instead. "You don't know anything about our finances." "I know more than you think." Ryan slowly turned pale. What did you do?" I looked at my son. "I saved your house." Silence. Complete silence. Emily blinked twice. What does that even mean? It means the bank was preparing for closure. Ryan whispered, You knew. I found out by accident. His shoulders slumped. You should have told us. I asked if everything was okay. You told me everything was fine. He couldn't answer. Because he remembered. He remembered lying. Emily folded her arms. Even if that's true, it has nothing to do with ownership. It has everything to do with ownership. She laughed again. No, the deed says otherwise. It does. Then show me. I reached into my leather briefcase. Frank had organized everything neatly. Property records, recorded deed, purchase agreement, county filings. I placed them on the island one page at a time. Emily barely glanced at them. They're fake. They're public records. Ryan slowly picked up the first page. His hands began trembling. Dad. He turned another page, then another. His breathing grew faster. No. He looked toward Emily. Our mortgage. She grabbed the papers. What am I looking at? The transfer. No. The recorded deed. No. The lender sold the property. No. She slammed the papers onto the counter. This isn't legal. At that exact moment, the front doorbell rang. Frank Collins walked inside carrying another folder. Emily spun toward him. Who are you? My name is Frank Collins. I'm Mr. Bennett's attorney. Her expression changed instantly. Frank remained professional, polite, calm. I understand this is upsetting. Upsetting! Emily nearly shouted. He's trying to steal our house. Frank didn't react. Mrs. Bennett, your lender initiated foreclosure proceedings after prolonged default. You entered into negotiations that unfortunately did not resolve the debt. So the lender exercised its legal rights, Ryan interrupted. We would have caught up. Frank looked directly at him. The bank didn't believe that. No one spoke. Frank continued. My client purchased the property before foreclosure was completed. The transaction fully satisfied the outstanding loan. Emily stared. So, we've been paying... Frank nodded once. Occupancy payments. She looked completely lost. No, that can't be right. I have every recorded document. She looked toward Ryan. Say something. Ryan didn't. Instead, he slowly sat down. His face had become almost gray. Then came the question I'd been expecting. Dad, why didn't you tell us? I looked at him for several seconds before answering. Because I wanted to protect your children. He frowned. And because... I paused. I wanted to believe you'd eventually tell me the truth. His eyes filled with tears. I was ashamed. I know. Emily stepped forward again. You had no right. That was the first time my voice became firm. No. I had every right. I bought the house. I paid every cent. I never asked for thank you. I never asked for repayment. I simply hoped you'd treat me like family. She stared at me. Then she said something I'll never forget. You manipulated us. I slowly shook my head. No. I gave you 9 months. 9 months to tell me. 9 months to ask for help. 9 months to treat me with respect. I looked directly at the rental agreement still lying in my briefcase. Instead, you handed your own father-in-law a lease. Ryan suddenly buried his face in his hands. Oh God. His shoulders shook. I can't believe this. I wanted to comfort him. Part of me still saw the little boy holding that plastic baseball trophy. But another part remembered every moment he'd stayed silent. Every time he'd looked away. Every opportunity he'd had to speak. He wasn't a child anymore. He was a husband, a father, a grown man responsible for his own choices. Emily's anger slowly gave way to panic. What happens now? Frank answered before I could. The notice provides the timeline required under Arizona law. If you vacate voluntarily, the process remains straightforward. If you refuse, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. Everyone understood. Emily looked around the kitchen, at the marble counters, the custom cabinets, the family photographs, everything she'd believed belonged to her. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. I stood. I'm not throwing you onto the street. Both of them looked up. I've already arranged temporary housing. Emily frowned. You did for the grandchildren. And for both of you. Ryan stared in disbelief. You still... I promised your mother I'd always take care of family. I picked up my hat. But taking care of family doesn't mean accepting disrespect. I walked toward the front door. Just before leaving, I turned back one final time. I didn't come here to win a house. I came here hoping not to lose my son. The silence behind me said everything. The moving boxes appeared 3 days later, not because they wanted to leave, because reality has a way of arriving whether we're ready for it or not. I drove by the house that Monday morning on my way to the hardware store. A rental truck sat in the driveway. Ryan was carrying boxes from the garage. Emily stood near the front door barking instructions into her phone. For just a moment I considered stopping. Instead, I kept driving. They deserved the privacy I wish they'd once given me. People often imagine revenge as shouting, slamming doors, public humiliation. The truth is, real consequences are usually very quiet. There were no police cars, no neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, no dramatic arguments, just a family slowly packing up the life they'd built. That afternoon, Frank called. They've accepted the temporary rental. I nodded. Good. They'll be moving in tomorrow. The children. They've already seen the new place. I smiled. Did they like it? They loved the backyard. I felt something inside me loosen. The furnished home I'd rented for them wasn't extravagant, just a comfortable 4-bedroom house 15 minutes away. Same school district, same baseball league, same dance studio. I had insisted on all of it. Children lose enough during adult conflicts. They didn't need to lose their friends too. Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed. It was Mason. Grandpa. Hi, buddy. We're moving. I know. There was a long pause. Did we do something bad? That question nearly broke me. No. You and Chloe didn't do anything wrong. Then why can't we stay? I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes. Sometimes. Another silence. Finally, he asked, Are you still my grandpa? I closed my eyes. Always. Even if we live somewhere else. I'll be your grandpa wherever you live. His voice brightened. Can we still build the treehouse this summer? I laughed softly through the lump in my throat. You better believe it. Cool. Then just before hanging up, he quietly said, I love you. I love you too, buddy. When the call ended, I sat alone in my apartment for several minutes. No courtroom victory could ever mean more than hearing those 4 words. The following Friday, Ryan asked if we could meet, not at the house, not at his rental, at a small coffee shop halfway between us. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, older than his 41 years. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup but never drank it. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. He continued. I should have told you about the mortgage. Yes. I was embarrassed. I know. I kept thinking I'd fix it before anyone found out. I nodded. That's what pride does. He looked down. I wasn't trying to hurt you. No, you were trying to avoid discomfort. He sighed deeply. I guess that's worse. It can be. We sat quietly for a while. Finally, he looked at me. Emily still thinks you planned all this. I didn't. I know. He rubbed his forehead. I do now. Then he surprised me. I found the notices from the bank. You did. They'd been arriving for months. He swallowed hard. Emily hid some of them. I frowned. You didn't know, no. I knew we were behind. I didn't know how bad it had become. I believed him. Not because he was my son, because I could see the shame on his face. It wasn't the shame of getting caught. It was the shame of finally seeing the truth. A week later, Emily called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. Hello. Her voice sounded different. Smaller somehow. I need to ask you something. I'm listening. Why? I smiled faintly. Why? What? Why would you pay for our rental? You could have just thrown us out. I leaned back in my chair. I could have. So why didn't you? I thought about Linda, about the note she left me, about 50 years of marriage built on compassion instead of scorekeeping. Because my disagreement is with you, not with Mason, not with Chloe. She didn't speak. After several seconds, I added, and despite everything, you're still the mother of my grandchildren. Her breathing caught. I don't deserve that kindness. No, you don't. But kindness isn't always earned. Sometimes it's chosen. She quietly thanked me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was the first honest conversation we'd had in months. Over the next several weeks, I slowly returned to the house. My house. It felt strangely empty. The echo surprised me most. A home filled with children always sounds alive. Without them, every room seemed too large, too quiet. I wandered through each space. The upstairs hallway still had pencil marks where Mason and Chloe had measured their height. Emily had painted over most of them during the remodel, but one remained, tiny, almost hidden behind a doorframe. Mason, age 7. I smiled. Some memories refused to disappear. Neighbors gradually learned the truth. Not from me, from public records. A few stopped by. I had no idea. You saved them. I tried. They charged you rent? I simply nodded. Most shook their heads. One older gentleman laughed. I would have thrown them out the same day. I smiled politely. Maybe. But anger makes fast decisions. Age had taught me to make slower ones. About a month after the move, Frank invited me to lunch. You know, he said, I practiced law for almost 40 years. I've seen families destroy each other over far less. I wasn't trying to destroy anyone. I know. That's why I wanted lunch. He stirred his iced tea. You realize you could have sued them. I wasn't interested. You could have demanded back rent. I laughed. They already tried that. Frank grinned. I suppose they did. Then he became serious. You're handling this better than most people would. I looked out the restaurant window. When Linda died, I learned something. Life's too short to spend chasing revenge. I only wanted my dignity back. Frank raised his glass. Mission accomplished. The house slowly came back to life. Not because new furniture arrived, because peace returned. For the first time in months, I could drink my morning coffee without feeling like an unwanted guest. No one criticized where I parked. No one complained about my tools. No one made me feel like I needed permission to exist. That peace was worth far more than $2.6 million. Still, every evening when I looked at the empty chairs around the dining table, I couldn't help wishing the price of peace hadn't been so high. Almost 6 months passed before Ryan knocked on my front door. I knew it was him before I opened it. Parents recognize the rhythm of their children's footsteps even when those children are middle-aged. When I pulled the door open, he stood there wearing jeans and old Arizona State sweatshirt in the same uneasy expression he'd worn as a teenager whenever he knew he'd made a mistake. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he held up a cardboard box. I found these while unpacking. I looked inside. Linda's old recipe book, several framed family photographs, a Christmas ornament Mason had made in 2nd grade, and my favorite hammer, the one my father had given me when I was 21. I thought I'd lost this. Ryan smiled sadly. It was in the garage. He hesitated. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Of course. The apartment wasn't large, but it was comfortable. A bookshelf lined one wall. Linda's favorite rocking chair sat beside the window. Fresh coffee filled the room. Ryan looked around quietly. I've never actually seen your place. No, I guess I never asked. There it was again. Another small truth. Not cruel, just painfully honest. He hadn't asked. Not because he didn't love me, because somewhere along the way he'd assumed I'd always be there. Always fine. Always waiting. We sat at the kitchen table. For several minutes we talked about ordinary things. The Arizona heat, baseball, the grandkids' school. Eventually Ryan took a long breath. I started seeing a counselor. I looked up. Good. I thought therapy was for people who couldn't handle life. He laughed bitterly. Turns out I was one of those people. No, I shook my head gently. Therapy is for people willing to face life. He nodded. The counselor asked me something during our second session. What? He asked when I stopped making my own decisions. Ryan stared into his coffee. I couldn't answer. He rubbed his hands together. I kept blaming Emily. He looked at me. But the truth is, I let it happen. I avoided every hard conversation. With her, with you, with myself. I simply listened. Sometimes people don't need advice. They need someone willing to hear the truth they've finally found. A few weeks later, Mason invited me to his baseball championship. This time, both Ryan and Emily greeted me at the entrance. Emily looked different, not because of her clothes, because of her expression. The confidence that had once bordered on arrogance had softened into humility. After the game, she walked over while Mason celebrated with his teammates. I owe you an apology. You don't have to. Yes. She interrupted herself. I really do. She folded her hands nervously. I spent years thinking success meant owning nicer things. She glanced toward the parking lot. The bigger house. The better neighborhood. The expensive vacations. I thought those things proved we'd made it. She looked back at me. I forgot that character matters more than appearances. I remained quiet. She continued, I also forgot that gratitude isn't something you feel. It's something you practice. There was no dramatic crying, no theatrical speech, just simple honesty. Sometimes that's the hardest kind. I'm sorry for treating you like you were a burden. I'm sorry for making you feel unwelcome. And, she swallowed, I'm sorry I tried to charge you rent. For the first time in months, I smiled without sadness. Thank you. Those 2 words were enough. Forgiveness doesn't always begin with a hug. Sometimes it begins with someone finally telling the truth. The relationship didn't magically return to what it had once been. Life doesn't work that way. Trust once broken grows back slowly, like a tree after a storm. New branches appear, but the scars remain. Ryan began calling every Sunday again, not because he felt obligated, because he wanted to. Sometimes we'd have breakfast together. Sometimes we'd work on little woodworking projects in my garage. Sometimes we'd simply sit on the porch drinking coffee without saying much at all. Oddly enough, the silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. One Saturday morning, Mason and Chloe came over to help me build the treehouse I'd promised. As we measured boards and hammered nails, Mason asked, Grandpa, yeah, buddy, are you rich? I laughed. Why would you ask that? Mom says you bought a really expensive house. I smiled. I've been fortunate. He thought for a moment. Is that why you're happy? Children ask remarkable questions. I set my hammer down. No. What makes you happy? I pointed toward him. You. He grinned. And your sister. And watching you learn how to build things. He looked at the half-finished treehouse. So, this is better than a mansion. I nodded. Much better. He seemed satisfied with that answer. Children usually are. Adults tend to complicate happiness. Several months later, I made one final decision. I invited Ryan and Emily to my attorney's office. The moment Frank entered with a folder, they exchanged nervous glances. Emily looked at me. We're not getting evicted again, are we? I laughed. No. Frank placed several documents on the table. I asked Mr. Collins to update my estate plan. Ryan immediately looked uncomfortable. Dad, you don't have to leave us anything. I know. Frank opened the folder. The house will remain in Mr. Bennett's trust. Ryan nodded. That makes sense. But, Frank continued, there is now a condition. Emily frowned. A condition? I answered before Frank could. If anything ever happens to me, the house won't immediately belong to either of you. Ryan looked confused. Then who? I smiled. A trust for Mason and Chloe. Their eyes widened. The home can't be sold until they're adults. It can't be borrowed against. It can't be used to finance lifestyles. It will always remain a place they can come home to. Ryan slowly smiled. You really thought this through. I've had plenty of time. Emily quietly reached across the table, not for the paperwork, for my hand. Thank you. This time, I believed her. As I grow older, I've realized something I wish I'd understood decades ago. A house isn't measured by its square footage. It isn't measured by granite countertops, market value, or curb appeal. A real home is measured by whether people inside feel safe, respected, welcomed, loved. I lost that feeling for a while, not because someone took it from me, because I forgot that protecting my peace is just as important as protecting the people I love. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean you stop loving your family. Sometimes, it's the only thing that gives your family a chance to become better. If Linda were sitting beside me today, I think she'd smile that quiet smile I miss every morning. Then she'd probably remind me of something she always believed. Kindness should open the door, but dignity should decide who stays. I think she was right. And if this story reminded you that love should never require you to surrender your self-respect, I hope you'll carry that thought with you long after today. If you've ever faced a difficult family situation or learned that forgiveness and boundaries can exist together, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, you're always welcome to join us again by subscribing for more. Until next time, take care of the people you love, including yourself.